Hey, what's up guys, it's Disturbed, and today I'm going to be doing an update to the best PvE DPS build video that I made a little bit a while ago. Now, before I say anything, I want to apologize to every single one of you for the fact that I used clickbait in that video and in a few other videos. You know, it's completely wrong of me to do, and I'm really sorry if that pissed anybody off. It takes a man to admit his mistakes, and that was definitely one of my mistakes, so I'm really sorry guys, and I will definitely 100% make sure that in the future I will never ever use clickbait again to use views. Completely wrong of me, 100%.
But Disturbed, you clickbaited on this video. What the fuck are you talking about?
Well there, Billy, surprise surprise, I'm actually not clickbaiting or lying. I really do have 1.5 million damage per second. It doesn't say that I have 1.5 mil DPS in the character screen. That's just because, you know, that statistic is broken. I made a whole video about why and proving that that is. So if you still don't believe me, feel free to check that out. I'm not claiming that I have 1.5 million DPS in the character screen. I'm claiming that I have 1.5 million damage per second. That's all that DPS means. The reason that I know that I do 1.5 million damage per second is due to SkillUp's DPS calculating spreadsheet. You know, big thanks to him. He worked really hard on that. I believe in it 100%. So big shout out to SkillUp. Love you, man. Great job on the calculator. But anyways, I inputted the damage numbers that I would be getting with my M1A, and if I were to have a max pulse, and my overall DPS ends up being 1.5 million. And this isn't even counting the fact that, you know, I have additional 72% enemy armor damage and damage to elites, which just isn't even being counted. And it's also not counting a max smart cover either. It's only counting my base stats with an added max pulse, because, you know, I always am running with somebody that's using max pulse. But if I were to add the enemy armor damage, you know, a max smart cover, damage to elites, this number would easily shoot up to over 2 million, possibly even 3 million. Now, for some reason, you want to take a look at the spreadsheet. I'll put a link to it in the description. Preview guys, you know, there's no BS going on. I'm being 100% truthful. Either way, the reason I'm making this video is because I've made a lot of improvements to that build and a few different changes. So I thought that making a new and improved video that isn't clickbaity could benefit a lot of people. So if you enjoy the video or it helps you out, please make sure to drop a like and share the video, as it does really help me. But regardless, let's get right into the build. Alright, so before you guys start rampaging in the comment section, let me explain my stats. As you can see, my firearms is super high, my toughness is pretty damn low, and my skill power is only decent at best. The reason my toughness is extremely low is because, you know, it really doesn't matter how high your toughness is. Against NPCs, you're going to get two-shot either way. That shotgunner doesn't give a shit, and you're constantly going to be behind a smart cover anyway, so there's basically like no point in stacking a bunch of toughness. Honestly, I don't really see any difference between having 300k or 500k. Even Marco Style has 700k, and he still said that he doesn't even see a difference, and I seem to die just as quickly, so it really doesn't matter that much. But if you are going to go into the dark zone, forget that. You want to stack over 400k against players, and just to be able to run around and get supply drops and whatnot, you want 400k toughness. But for me, I only use this build when farming for gear, and when I do, I usually only farm like Heroic Dragon's Nest, or I'll go into the underground or something, so the setup is just perfect for that. But again, if you do plan on going to the dark zone and start farming there, just give yourself like an extra 100k toughness just as a safety measure instead of the 4k firearms, and you'll be perfectly fine. Next up, let's take a look at my skill power. I know it's really low, but honestly, you don't really need that much skill power with this build. You're not a support build, so you don't really need to run a pulse or a smart cover, so your skill power is really just there to make you heal for more. So stacking skill power past that is kind of pointless. It's really only there to heal you for more, since you aren't running a pulse or smart cover, so stacking past that's pretty much pointless. Might as well put it into firearms. Now, I know that SkillUp did say that firearms doesn't matter, but just to put into perspective that firearms actually does matter, on like an SMG or something, per 100 firearms usually equals per 100 base damage. So like 1,000 firearms could easily equal up to 1,000 or 2,000 base damage, depending upon how high the firearm scaling is and all this other stuff. But just to give you a basic ratio, usually like 100 firearms is 100 base damage on an SMG, which is actually a pretty damn good amount of damage. It's not a lot, but it still makes it worth it to stack into firearms. Alright, so now that's out of the way, let's get into my gear. I'm going to be running 5 pieces of Sentry's Call because the extra headshot damage, damage to elites, and the marking is just way better than every single other gear set by a country mile in terms of damage. So there's pretty much no other choice there. And then for the other piece, you can either go with Savage Gloves for the extra crit chance, or for a Reckless Chest for the flat out damage. I didn't need the crit chance because I always have somebody on my team running with a max pulse, so I'm going to be crit capped anyway, so I decided to go for a Reckless Chest. But if you don't have someone on your team running a 40% crit chance pulse, I just put on the Savage Gloves. Now to take a quick look at what weapons you're going to use for your primary, you want to be using an M1A. You cannot change this. The M1A is the best gun in the games in terms of damage, and to top it off, off, you get the sentry marks that come with it as well, increasing damage of your whole team and your damage by like up to 52%. So definitely make sure to get an M1A because you'll be mostly using that with this build. For your secondary, there's a bunch of things to pick from. I decided to use a shotgun because I only pull this out when NPCs are like really close to me, and at close range a shotgun can do a shitload of damage, and you can also sentry mark people with a shotgun. And you can also stagger them so they can't really move for a second, and you can get them in a stagger lock or a stun lock. So a shotgun is just incredibly powerful. But alternatively, you can use like an SMG or an assault rifle. It's really just up to you. You won't really be using your secondary that often, but when you do, I prefer to use a shotgun. But it's really just up to personal preference and what gun you have that has the best talents, etc. In terms of talents on your guns, I made a separate video talking about the very best talents for guns in PvE. So if you want to check that out, I'll put an annotation on the screen here. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the weapons. Now let's take a look at every single gear piece specifically and exactly how you want it set up to maximize damage. Starting off with your chest piece, you want armor to reach armor cap and damage to elite so that you're doing as much damage as you possibly can. On your mask, I'd say go for damage to elite so you're again doing as much damage as possible, but you can definitely feel free to go for skill power or for crit chance if that's what you prefer. But with this build, I prioritize being able to do as much damage as you possibly can, and stacking damage to elites makes me do just a shitload of extra damage. And then as for the minor attributes, try to get enemy armor damage because that will actually help you with your DPS a pretty good amount. It's kind of the exact same as damage to elites is. Moving on to your knee pads, you want crit damage, and if you can try to get enemy armor damage also. That also increases your damage. For your backpack, plain and simple, you want crit damage, nothing else there. Skill power, like I said, isn't really worth to get it, so definitely make sure to get crit damage. On your gloves, again, crit damage, you want damage to elites as well, and you can also get crit chance. You can go for like SMG damage or something instead of damage to elites, but I found damage to elites to be way more beneficial. But if you are doing PvP, damage to elites isn't going to do anything, so in that case, you could stack gun damage like SMG damage or AR damage. It's really up to you, but this build is prioritized for PvE, so in PvE you want damage to elites. And then onto your holster, obviously you want armor to be able to reach the cap. Now in terms of modding your gear, I'd say skill power. You want enough skill power to where your heals aren't completely useless, so stacking skill power on your mods will help you out with that. If you don't stack any skill power on your mods, you probably will only have around 13k. So, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite saying you shouldn't stack skill power, and you should. You just want to get it up to a decent, a high amount so that your heals will actually do something. And then past that, like I said before, it's a little bit pointless. Now looking at your skills, you want first aid with overdose so that you can heal yourself when you need to. And for your secondary skills, since you don't need to use pulse or a smart cover because, a support player on your team should be, you can just use something like Seeker Mine with gas to stun enemies, Sticky Bomb Flashbang, Immunizer to block out like all status effects, or even Ammo Cache to get your skills back faster and to reload and not use ammo. It just really depends on what you're doing and what your team wants you to do, so it's up to personal preference and that situation. Next up is your talents. For your first talent, you want to use Triage so that when you're stacked on top of your group, you guys can heal each other with your first aid and then get like all your skills back near instantly. This talent is just absolutely amazing. For the next talent, I decided to take off Precision because you should be running with a max pulse on your team, and if they have full uptime on it, or even if they don't and they're using Triage, you really don't need Precision at that point, so I just decided to switch it off, and I picked Stopping Power instead, which is a talent almost nobody uses, and it's actually surprisingly pretty good. It reads, suppress a hostile to increase headshot damage by 25% for 10 seconds. So basically, when you shoot an NPC that's hiding behind cover, it will suppress them, and then it will increase your headshot damage with this talent by a crap load. Not the best talent in the world, but there really wasn't anything better to use, and 25% headshot damage isn't bad at all, especially with an M1A, so I definitely go for this talent since this build is meant for maximizing your damage. Next I have on is One Is None. Pretty sure we all know about this one. Lastly, I have Combat Medic for that extra survivability when I need it. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it for the build. If you have everything set up right, you should be able to hit people for absolutely insane amounts like you can see in the gameplay here. And this build should do really nicely for you, amounting you up to easily over 1 million DPS, and possibly even 2 or 3 million if you have it set up perfectly. Anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching. If this video helped you out or you did enjoy it, please make sure to drop a like and share it, as that does help me out a ton, and subscribe for videos similar to this one. I'll see you later guys.